We are looking at James Holmes still with the strange spectral red hair. Expressionless, except it seems to me, George, every now and then his head almost seems to be nodding.
He does. He seems to be nodding off. Sometimes his eyes go wide, then close for several seconds at a time. He really seems out of it, Diane. We only know what we're seeing right now. We don't know what's going on in that courtroom, but he does seem to be just completely out of touch with what's happening.
Bring in our legal analyst, Dan Abrams, because, Dan, what we're looking at now is just an advisement. It is a first appearance. It's not a formal charge. He will not plead guilty, not guilty?
That's right. This is just to let him know, in essence, why are you here? Why have you been arrested? They've told him that. His lawyers said we've already advised him of that. But when you look at his face, wow. I mean, at times expressionless, at times, as you put it, almost seems like he's dozing off. And this is going to create an important legal question, which is he competent to stand trial? Remember, when we talk about the insanity defense, a totally separate issue. Competence to stand trial means, can you communicate with your lawyers? Do you understand the proceedings against you? And either intentionally or unintentionally, he sure looks like someone.
But that bar is generally fairly low.
Very low, very low. You just have to be able to communicate.
What everybody's home to know, occasionally this video freezes up out of this courtroom. It's being fed straight out of the courtroom. He does have a public defender. We do not know yet if they will charge with the death penalty. We assume, given that the accusation against him, that it will be a real consideration.
The DA Carol Chambers said that she is considering it right now. She wants to consult with the victim's family. And the judge, Dan, said that Holmes will be back in court next Monday for the formal filing of the charges.
That's right. So what the judge is doing now is going through all of the various motions that he has in front of him. Most of them are pretty standard. The one interesting one is the fact that the defense is going to get access to the movie theater probably tomorrow. That's pretty unusual. That's a crime scene that the movie theater company has not gotten back yet, so they're going to get access to a pretty pristine crime scene.
I want to bring in David Muir, who is there at the scene, and he was brought here, David, through an underground tunnel.
He was, Diane. In fact, he's been held at the county jail here in isolation. They brought him through that underground tunnel right into the courthouse here behind me. And to give you an idea of what's going on inside, you're seeing that in the courtroom. There's an overflow room for victims' families who wanted to come see him firsthand. And I can't underscore what it must be like for this community, still so raw, to see the suspect in that courtroom with that fiery hair, that he died. We had heard that from authorities, and now we're seeing it play out in that courtroom. I wanted to tell you about the DA in this case, Carol Chambers. George mentioned ago that she discussed the possibility of the death penalty as she headed into the courthouse today. But to give you a little bit of perspective, there are 3 people on death row here in the state of Colorado. 2 of them were put there by Carol Chambers' team. So we know her history here. She said she'll discuss that with the families. And the police chief here telling me in the last 24 hours that suspect, as we see there in court with his head down, he's not talking, nor are his parents. The parents not cooperating at this point.
That's what I was going to ask you. First of all, we don't know if his father, who was presumed to be flying to Colorado, is there somewhere in the courtroom. And also, he's been held in solitary confinement. So we have no idea if he met with his parents, anything at all?
I did ask the police chief, has the father seen his son? The police chief looked me right in the eye and said, all I can tell you is the father is not cooperating with us. It is believed that the father did make his way here from California. Obviously, we believe perhaps the mother is still back in San Diego. But the police chief told me when he saw the video that ABC News obtained in the last 24 to 40 hours, that exclusive video of James Holmes at 18 years old, when he looked so different with such promise at that science camp, the chief looked at me and said, that's the rap on this guy. He's a very smart young man, very intelligent, and he said, the reason I know that is what I saw in that apartment. He said he had never seen anything like that before.
So, Dan, I want to ask you, because we continue to look at his face, what kind of medication do they give if you're in solitary confinement after an event like this?
Well, look, the only kind of medication would be medication that was absolutely necessary. And we don't know the exact medication that he's on. But, again, either this is intentional or unintentional in the way that he's appearing in that courtroom. To follow up on something that David was just talking about, which is the death penalty, there is no question in my mind that he's going to face the death penalty. I mean, if there's a death penalty in the state of Colorado, which there is, yeah, there may be only 3 people on death row. This has every aggravating factor that you could be looking for in connection with that.
And Dan, you talked about the bar for whether he was competent to stand trial. That is quite different from the insanity defense that he may find.
That's right. Competence to stand trial is really about, are we ready to bring you to trial? And the question there is, really, can you talk to your lawyers? Do you understand what's happening? And that's a really low bar. But when you look at him in that courtroom right now, it seems to me that's going to be a question.
And Dan, is it significant that when the judge addressed Holmes, he didn't answer? We heard instead from the attorney.
No, but it is interesting to me that he is communicating with his lawyers. Because, again, that's significant.
So now we see him rise, head out of the courtroom, not a single word. And again, that expression on his face. Could we put up a split screen? I'm going to ask Mark Bernstein, our producer, to do this because we have obtained this exclusive video of him in high school, and it is so hard not to keep asking whether we'll get an answer. We don't know. Of him as he was
Holmes 12
in high
CR
school and him
1522.
as we see him now
Please.
today. If we could do that, just to see the video again of the last time we saw him, the last time we saw him speak, and again, this was when he was at a science fair.
Vibrant,
and
articulate.
completely.
I want to just emphasize again how important I think it is that he was talking to his lawyers. I mean, that they're going over and communicating with him. Because that's one of the tests for competence to stand trial, is can you successfully communicate with your lawyers and understand the proceedings against you?
You see the split screen right there right now, Diane.
Advised the charges.
Smiling.
The duty judge to make preliminary determination of probable cause to believe you're committed the offense of first-degree murder, which is a Class 1 felony
I
under
want
Colorado
to ask
law.
you also, Dan.
Ordinarily,
it looks like
individuals
his
are entitled to
parents are
bail.
not cooperating.
Given the nature of the charges,
They don't
you are
have a
currently
legal
being held in a no.
That's right. There's no such thing as parental privilege. There is a spousal privilege in most states, but parents don't have the right not to testify against their kids. But the fact that they're not, quote, cooperating, meaning they're not being helpful in connection with this investigation, is significant. They don't have a legal right to be helpful, but they will have a legal right ultimately to testify in connection with it.
And I want to go to Pierre Thomas, our justice correspondent, been on this from the start. Pierre,
Well,
one of the most significant things the investigators found after they blew up that booby trap in Holmes' apartment, the computer. Are they learning anything? Do we know anything more about the computer at this point?
Well, we're told that the computer has been taken to a forensic lab. We're trying to find out exactly where. And I was told by a source that they have to be very careful in trying to get inside of that computer because they don't know if he set up firewalls or programs that would delete all the files before they can actually get to them. So that is really key, though, because they are hoping that will give some insight into what took him to the dark side.
And Pierre,
We also,
Call People versus James
we also
Holmes
found
12.
some very interesting paraphernalia in his apartment, some Batman paraphernalia, a mask, also a Batman poster, and they think that shows his obsession again with that comic book character.
And Pierre, in the early hours after this happened on Friday, we were first told that he gave himself up peacefully, easily. Do investigators now believe that he actually had an escape plan?
Unclear on that. We're told what happened is that he came out of the theater, had on all the tactical gear, that police saw him, and at that point, most of the weapons were in the theater, according to my sources. The shotgun, the AR-15 rifle, and also a pistol that had an extended clip. Those were in the theater. So when he encountered police, it was a very quiet turnover into custody.
I want to go back to David Muir, who's on the scene there, because as you said, David, I keep thinking about the families of the victims, the families of those who were wounded, watching this, hearing this today.
Well, I've talked to so many families here, as you know, Diane, since we arrived here Friday morning, and all of them have said repeatedly that what they would like to do is turn the focus away from this suspect. And so I think a lot of folks dealing today with the need to see him in that courtroom begin to go down this road of justice for them, while at the same time, this comes less than 24 hours after that very powerful, emotional vigil here in Aurora, with crowds swelling, the visit from President Obama. The police chief actually telling me that when the call came in that initial night about the massacre inside that movie theater, he got a call from his wife. His own teenage daughter was at a midnight showing of Batman 2 across town, but he wasn't sure of that until he got confirmation. And he, like all the parents here, said as soon as he saw his daughter, he held her. And so many families have been doing that for really 3 days now.
And of course, President Obama came there yesterday. He said, as a father and a husband, and neither he nor the governor would even speak the name of the suspect.
So, Dan, one more thought before we let everyone return to their regular programming about what you saw in this courtroom.
We saw someone who is either on purpose or through no control of his own appearing very out of it. This defendant in court, at times looking like he was sleeping, at times looking like he didn't know what was going on. And that's a very important legal question that will have to be determined, which is he mentally prepared to stand trial? Very low standard, very rare that someone is determined to be incompetent to stand trial. But as I looked inside that courtroom, that's the first question that I was thinking about.
That's exactly what I thought. I have not seen someone act this way in a courtroom before, but Dan asked the right question. Is it intentional, or is that the way he is right now?
Yeah.
And the decision, I assume, the decision to keep that red hair, to keep the red hair, which, if this is, again, still an alleged situation, but that's what everybody remembers from that night.